It's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Kenneth Aigen. Dr. Aigen is an associate professor in music therapy at New York University. He's lectured internationally and authored numerous publications in Northrop-Frobens on Northrop-Frobens music therapy, qualitative research, and music-centered music therapy. Two of his books, Pathways of Development in Northrop-Frobens music therapy and music-centered music therapy, have been translated into Japanese and Korean. Dr. Aigen is president of the Northrop-Frobens Music Therapy Foundation. He's also past president of the American Association for Music Therapy and was the scientific committee chairman for the 9th World Congress for Music Therapy held in Washington, D.C. in 1999. His honors include the Research and Publications Award from the American Music Therapy Association and the Limbach Award for Distinguished Teaching from Temple University. His most recent publication is the book titled The Study of Music Therapy, Core Issues and Concepts, published by Routledge. So I welcome Dr. Kenneth Aigen.
Water before we start. Well, hello everyone. Thank you for coming today. I really consider it a privilege to be able to share my thinking in a forum like this one, and I'm grateful for the gift of your time and attention. This is the first time I'm on this campus since we lost Evelyn Selesky, longtime director of Malloy's music therapy program. And I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for Evelyn. When I was 24 years old in the fall of 1980, I applied for a job as a pianist for a theater arts group at the Lifeline Center, a school for children with emotional disabilities. The person whose position I was applying for was Evelyn. I didn't get the gig, but I did accept an offer of employment as a teacher's assistant at the school. I happened to run into Evelyn when I was at the school completing some paperwork. She was extremely friendly and warm to me and told me that she was leaving the job to pursue a degree in something called music therapy at New York University. She said that if I liked working with the kids at the school, that I ought to consider music therapy. And the quality of the encounter with Evelyn played a direct role in getting me to NYU and creating a career and a life in music therapy. I'd also like to thank the Rebecca Center and the music therapy program staff, particularly Suzanne Sorrell and John Carpente. John's one of those friends who invites you to do things that you may really want to do, but always wind up being a lot more work than you think they'll be. So John, I hope I can repay that favor before too long. And last, I'd like to give a shout out to CJ Shiloh, who's in the audience today. CJ and her colleague Sunny are partners in a groundbreaking venture presenting sensory-friendly concerts to autistic people and their friends and family members. You'll be hearing more about the program later, but I want to acknowledge how inspiring she's been for me and how much she's helped me to learn about the contemporary autistic community. In preparing for this talk, it became clear to me that autistic people and their families have been severely mistreated by the healthcare professionals charged with helping them. The litany of mistreatment is staggering, including electroconvulsive therapy, inappropriate psychotropic medications, blaming parents for their children's difficulties, warehousing autistic people for decades in completely inappropriate institutions that only made their difficulties worse, the offering of quack dietary and vitamin-based cures, and the dissemination of fraudulent research claiming a role for childhood vaccines in causing autism. So my talk today is informed by a belief that the entire professional, clinical, educational, and research community has a moral and ethical obligation to remedy the mistakes of the past. I first became aware of autism during my studies as a psychology undergraduate in the mid-1970s. Over time, I became familiar with names such as Kanner, Rimland, Wing, and Bettelheim. But I didn't have a clear sense of the role of each individual in relation to autism. However, reading a recent book titled Neurotribes, The Legacy of Autism and The Future of Neurodiversity by Steve Silverman has been a life-changing event for me. It offers the most complete and insightful account of the history of autism that I've come across, and its narrative serves as the source for the brief history of autism that I'd like to begin with today. Silverman's thesis is that the history of autism, as it's commonly told and understood, is fundamentally flawed in ways that render autistic people in previous generations harder to see. Consequently, that autism appears as a 20th century phenomenon and that its prevalence is seen as dramatically increasing in recent years are really both based on a fallacy. The contemporary history begins with Hans Asperger, a medical doctor who was working at a clinic in the 1930s Vienna when he first encountered autistic children. It was in 1938, after the German annexation of Austria, that Asperger gave his first talk on autism. And even then he displayed progressive tendencies, arguing that not everything that steps out of line and is thus abnormal must necessarily be inferior. He urged the clinicians in attendance at this first talk not to give up on such children, because through maturation, their functioning could improve in ways not considered possible when they were young. Asperger made a choice in this talk that contributed to confusion about the patients he saw and about the connection between Asperger's syndrome and autism. He focused on the more verbal clients as a way of giving a more promising description of his therapeutic approach. But this choice led to the misunderstanding that Asperger only worked with so-called high-functioning children. Silverman asserts that this era has obscured the most important aspects of Asperger's discoveries about autism, that it wasn't at all rare, that it was found in all age groups, and that it had a broad range of manifestations, from the inability to speak to an enhanced capacity for focusing on a single object of interest for an extended period of time. Asperger understood from the beginning that autism existed as a spectrum. Although he survived the war, Asperger's work and contributions were nearly lost in the rubble of his clinic and in the chaos of post-war Europe. And while Asperger's thesis was published in German, nearly contemporaneously with Leo Kanner's first publication on the topic, it was Kanner's work that was publicized and that became known.